Okay, review time. 1991 world champion Minnesota Twins. Let's get into what we have offensively here. Set in stone every day, 1-2 in the lineup. We have Dan Gladden and Chuck Knobloch. You see their on base chance numbers right there. Those numbers are looking above average out of both. I just wish Knobloch's numbers against left handed pitching was just a little bit higher than that, but those numbers are still looking pretty good. Now let's look at the three guy, Kirby Puckett. I'm going to show you all of his numbers, his on base chances, and his hits with multiple base advancement. As you'd expect, Puckett just absolutely demolishes left handed pitching like he always did. And the numbers against righties are checking out okay as well. So you're looking very solid. Number three with Kirby Puckett. Now, the 91 Twins, according to the Diamond Gems book, they didn't do a lot of platooning, but they did move guys around in the lineup depending on whether they were playing lefties or righties. So I'm going to go player for player here. The next guy I'm going to show you is Kent Herbeck. Now, Herbeck would hit cleanup against righties and he would hit seventh against lefties. You see his hits with multiple base advancement. Next, I'm going to show you the everyday DH, Chili Davis. He would hit cleanup against lefties and fifth against righties. There are his hits with multiple base advancement. Then you follow that up with catcher Brian Harper. He was slated number 5 against lefties and number 6 against righties. You see his numbers. All these numbers are checking out well above average, by the way. Now I'm going to show you right fielder Shane Mack, number 6 against lefties and 7th against righties. And you can see Mack's numbers against lefties just completely jumps off the page. In fact, I would drop a suggestion and just maybe move Mack up in the order against lefties, like maybe have him clean up or fifth when you're playing with them. And you could see he has well above average numbers against right handed pitching as well. So these multiple base advance hits for the 1991 Twins is looking really nicely. The one platoon that you did have, one positional platoon, was at third base. Laus would play against lefties, Pags would play against righties. And keeping in mind that this platoon is penciled into the lineup as hitting eighth in your order, you could see this is a pretty deep lineup because all those numbers are looking pretty darn good for someone that you have hitting that low in your order. Last, I'm going to show you the everyday shortstop. Hitting ninth in your order was Greg Gagne, and you could see he has nice on base chance numbers right there. So you could see that this is a lineup that really has no automatic outs in it. It is a very deep lineup. And just to dig a little deeper into the offense, I'm going to show you a few guys here who you could either use as a spot starter or bring in off the bench if you ever need to pinch hit. I'm going to show you Pedro Munoz's numbers against left-handed pitching. Then I'm also going to show you Randy Bush's numbers against right-handed pitching. And then I'm going to show you the numbers for switch hitter Gene Larkin, all of his numbers. So you could see this is a team that is just loaded with depth, not only in the starting lineup, but you have some very nice options to bring in off the bench. And that is all reflected in their overall score. As you can see, I got the 91 Twins offense grading out a very good score of a 4.1 out of 5. The only thing that I would say about this offense is I just wish the on base chance numbers at the top of the order with Gladden and Knobloch were just a little bit higher, but overall the offense is looking outstanding. So that's how I look at the 91 Twins offense. Now let's take a look at what we have defensively. Really, the only weakness that I would say that you have in the field that jumps out at you right off the bat is with Chuck Knobloch at second base. And again, it had been a while since I'd gone through the 91 Twins. I'd forgotten that he was a 3 in 1991, which I'm not particularly crazy about. I'm also not crazy about the E21. I really 20 is my cutoff point at second base, just like An E24 is my cutoff at third base, and my cutoff at shortstop is an E26. My cutoff at an E20, or excuse me, my cutoff at second base is I really don't like anything above an E20. So I would say that this is a little bit of a weakness. It's not a glaring weakness like you see on some teams, but it's really too bad because if you were to just look at the middle infield defense, you could see you don't get much better than Gray Gagnitz at shortstop. He's a 1 and an E12. That is really one of the best ratings I've ever seen at shortstop. I've seen a couple of shortstops in the past. Like I remember one year Derek Jeter, I think it was his 98 card. He was a 1 and an E10. I know Manuel Lee one year for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think it was 1992. He was either a 1 or a 2 with an E8. But you usually don't see E ratings that low at shortstop. So you're looking really good there. Your outfield defense every day left to right. You could see right there Gladden, Puckett, and Mack. No issues right there. The only thing that I would say is I'm not crazy about the double digit E rating in right field with Mac, but when you just look at the grades, you can't complain about a 2 and 2 1s in your outfield. So that's looking really good. And a third base with the third base platoon, obviously you're looking really good with Mike Pagliarulo. And Scott Louse at third when he plays against lefties. This is what I've kind of spoken on in the past before, where I am willing to overlook a 4 at third base and first base so long as the E ratings are in line. And I know Scott Louse's E rating is below where my breaking point is as far as an E rating at third base. But the fact that he's a 4 and he's right at the edge where I don't want to see E ratings go any higher, I would say that, yeah, this is a weakness, but it's not a glaring weakness. It's not something that you would ever say if you're playing with the 91 Twins and your opponent is throwing a lefty, you wouldn't say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to play Louse at third because he's just too much of a liability at third base. This is something that I could live with. So I have the 91 Twins grading out defensively at a very, very good score of a 4.1 out of 5. And really, the only things that brought down their score was I'm not crazy about Knobloch's rating and E rating at second base. And Shane Mack's E rating in right field brought down the overall E rating score just a little bit. So that's how I have the 91 Twins looking so far. So far, so good. They get a 4.1 for offense and they get a 4.1 for defense. Now let's take a look at the 91 Twins starting rotation. Let's get started with ace Jack Morris. You see his on base chance numbers as well as his ballpark effect home runs. Now, Jack Morris was always one of those guys who, first off, right off the bat, let me just say this guy was a no brainer when it, in my opinion, as far as being a Hall of Famer. I never listened to those 20-year-old somethings who were complaining when he was inducted to the Hall of Fame. The guy was durable and he was a winner, and there was no question he was one of the best players at his position for more than a decade. With that said, Jack Morris was never a guy who would have a great Stratomatic card because he was never really a low whip guy, as well as he was always a guy who would have a tendency to give up some home runs, as you would expect, pitching all those years in Detroit. So his on base chance numbers, especially against left handed hitting, is a little bit high. And compared to other years, the power opportunities on Jack Morris's card from 1991 is not as glaring as it was. I remember it being from some years in the 80s. So Jack Morris is looking pretty good as your ace. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the numbers for Kevin Tapani and Scott Erickson. Tapani's card, he has a pretty weak card when he goes up against right-handed hitting. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, if you're sitting down and you're doing like a solo playthrough or like a replay of something and you go with the lineups as they were in real life, it may not affect you that much, but this is something to keep in mind. If you're ever playing against the 1991 Twins, I would definitely stack your lineup with right-handed bats if you can, because um, these numbers that you see against right-handed hitting is a little bit alarming. Scott Erickson's card checks out very good. Alan Anderson, your number 4 guy, you see his numbers right there. So if we're to look at the 1991 Twins rotation, you're going to see that I have them grayed out at a good score of a 3.75 out of 5. You're looking good with Jack Morris as your ace, and I'm very comfortable with Scott Erickson's card. Kevin Tapani's card can be an issue depending on your opponent. So that's something that brought down the starting rotation depth score just a little bit. Plus, I'm not crazy about any other cards that you have in this starting rotation, even though, let's face it, again, if you're sitting down and you're playing a short series, you're just going with the top 3, whether it's a best of 5 or a best of 7 anyway. You're going Morris, Tapani, and Erickson. But again, those numbers that Tapani throws out there against right-handed batters, that worries me a little bit. So that brings down the starting rotation score just a little bit, but it still grades out very nicely at 3.75 out of 5. Now let's take a look at the bullpen. First, let's look at your closer, Rick Aguilera. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about this card. The numbers speak for themselves. That's a perfect 5 out of 5 reliever ace card, in my opinion. The only thing that I would say about Rick Aguilera, I just wish he was a 2 inning reliever. That's all I would say, but that's not something that I'm going to hold against a reliever when I grade their card. Now let's look at the bullpen depth. First, I'm going to show you the numbers for Terry Leach and Carl Willis. Now, both of these guys are righties. Willis is a 3 inning reliever, which you like to see out of a setup guy, as well as Terry Leach is a 2 inning reliever. And you could see both of them are very effective at getting right-handed batters out. And as far as their numbers against left-handed hitting, this is what I would say. And I know I've said this in the past about not only relievers but starters as well, pitching cards in general. I've always said that I would gladly trade a couple of more hits or walks on a card so long as they keep the ball in the ballpark. I know I've said that in the past a lot, and I still feel that way. However, when you get into numbers that are double digits like Leach and Willis have, when it comes to their on base chance numbers, when you roll their card and there's a left handed hitter at the plate, double digit numbers do worry me a little bit. Now, on the flip side, and I'm going to include Rick Aguilera in this next graphic, you see Aguilera, Leach, and Willis all have one thing in common. They all keep the ball in the ballpark. I don't know if I've ever seen this in Stratomatic since I started doing these videos where you have 3 guys, really your 3 main relievers, Leach, Willis, and your closer Aguilera. All 3 of them have no home runs on their card. And that's saying a lot. So I really do like that aspect of it. I like the fact that Leach and Willis both have lights out numbers when it comes to getting right-handed hitters out, but the numbers against left-handed hitters is just a little bit high. Believe me, if Leach and Willis, if both of their numbers were 8 or 9 against left-handed batters, the bullpen would have scored a lot higher. But those double-digit numbers do worry me just a little bit. I'm also going to show you one little diamond in the rough here, and that's right-hander Tom Edens. Now, in 1991, Edens did not really have numbers that really jumped off the page to you. He threw 33 innings and he had 6 starts. And in Stratomatic, he is a 3 inning reliever. Albeit he's a right-handed reliever, this would probably be one of your better options if you're in the middle of the game and you're trying to get the ball to Rick Aguilera for the 9th inning. This is probably your best option when it comes to getting a left-handed hitter out. You can see these numbers check out well above average, both his on base chance numbers, and he's pretty good at keeping the ball in the ballpark, especially against right-handed hitters. So that is definitely an option that you could use out of your bullpen. Steve Bedrosian, I'm not crazy about his card at all. I show you his numbers right there. And the rest of the bullpen is really not worth showing at all. So the 1991 Twins bullpen, I have them grade out at a good score of a 4 out of 5. And a lot of that is carried, of course, by the ace Rick Aguilera, as he gets a perfect 5 out of 5 score. The bullpen depth, again, it would have scored a lot higher if the on base chance numbers against left-handed hitters for Leach and Willis was just a little bit lower. But anyway, still a good score for the 1991 Twins bullpen. So if we're to peel everything back and we're to look at the 1991 Twins as a whole, you're going to see that they grade out at a very, very good score, just under a 4, as they score a 3.98 out of 5, which honestly, this is right around where I would have put the Minnesota Twins before sitting down and really breaking down the cards, because I do remember playing against this team once in the past. And I think the best compliment that you could give this team or any team in Stratomatic when you play against them is very simply the fact that they're a very hard team to beat, because this is a team that has no glaring weaknesses. As far as issues with the team, and again, I wouldn't call these big weaknesses necessarily, but I wish, number one, I wish the defense at second base was a little bit better. Number two, I wish there was a viable left-handed option out of the bullpen. Now, again, that's not something I've said in the past. That's not something that is going to break a team's score just because they don't really have a viable lefty option out of the bullpen. But it is something that can help a team score, especially when it comes to bullpen depth, because as we all know, playing in Stratomatic, it's nice to have those options to come out of the bullpen to get big outs in the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth innings as you try to get the ball to your closer. But overall, this is an excellent Stratomatic team. The offense is very solid. Like I said before, there's no automatic outs in it. And like I showed you the numbers before, and I'll show you them again, you could see that this team can really beat up on left-handed pitching, which I like to see. You got great depth in this lineup, as well as you have nice options to bring off the bench. You can make a lot of moves with this team if the game calls for it. You have a well above average starting rotation, and you have a great closer in Rick Aguilera. So that is my grade for the 1991 Minnesota Twins. They score just a hair under a 4, that magical 4 out of 5 number, which I talk about a lot. They grade out at a 3.98 out of 5. So that's my analysis on the 1991 World Champion Minnesota Twins. I thank you all for watching. It is greatly appreciated, and I'll talk to you all down the road.